Hi, my name's Ben and this is my scene for Game Engine Architecture. So just before we get into the code that I've done, I'd just like to show you some of the included features that I've actually got into my game. So first of all, we've got 9 different models all within the game scene. We've got 5 different building assets and 4 different car assets, like vehicles. These all have their own textures and things other than the buildings, which do share textures. Then obviously we've got the textures as just mentioned. We've got billboards, as you can see in the photo. We've got some trees there. We've got the terrain, which also includes a height map, as you can see down in the list further. See, the height map was imported and the terrain was then had a texture image stuck onto it. We have the free moving camera, which you can move with the arrow keys on your keyboard. We've got a sky dome, we've got fog and / exponential fog, instance models, lights, and also a port to Linux. Okay, so the first thing I did was the terrain. This terrain has a height map and then a texture image. The height map is loaded from a file, has a width and height, which is what determines the width and height of the actual terrain you see in the game. And then the image is placed on top of the generated vertices of the terrain in the game. Okay, so next I did the sky dome. The sky dome is a sphere made up of the vertical and horizontal vertices, which then has an image which is loaded from a file, put on top of it to then create this beautiful sky scene. So next to the model was probably a big part of this project. So obviously I've got 5 building models and 4 car models used, all are different. These models are loaded from a file which all contain the vertex locations and normals within the file. These models and textures are then passed into the model renderer, which then uses those vertex locations and normals to then draw the cars and buildings onto the scene. These are actually drawn in the game engine file, however, and the scale and rotation of these models, and including the position, can all be adjusted manually for each model in the game engine file as well. This is in relation to the position of 0, 0, 0. Okay, so next we have the instances that I've done. So the instance renderer is basically allows you to take a model, so one of my buildings for example, and make multiple versions of that building without having to copy and paste code. So I think, for example, for some of my buildings I've done 5 of each of the buildings spread over the landscape that I've created, and each of these buildings has a randomly generated position and rotation, just to give it some variety. And this is the same for the cars as well. I've done instances for the cars, so I've done 10 of each car, and these also have random rotation and position along the terrain. So then we have the lighting and fog. So these heavily use the vertex and fragment shaders within the model renderer class. The fog takes the density amount and then colour of the fog, and then changes the colour of the fragment shader, and the light takes into account the colour, ambient, position of the light, shininess, and specular to then change the fragment shader. So then finally we just have the performance of the game itself towards the end. So after all the models have been added, the game without VSync on runs at 2100 FPS and uses 332 megabytes of memory. Then adding lights to that, the game still runs at 2100 FPS, however it's now gone up to 333 megabytes of memory. The exponential fog stays exactly the same of the lights, as I already had the fog already, I just changed the exponential fog. And finally, the instances have upped that memory usage to 336 megabytes of memory, but the FPS stays at 2100. And finally, I would just like to state that the car and building models I did get from Sketchfab, and they can be found at these links here. So thank you for listening to me, and that has been my game scene for game engine architecture.